Well, good morning, everyone. I am so glad that you guys are with me today as we continue our study in the book of Nehemiah, and we also continue our current series that is called Unfinished Business. I want you to kind of take a trip back in time with me. About 15 years ago, there was this group of people who decided they wanted to start a church in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and they were going to call it Mosaic Church. Turned out to be a great church. I don't know if you've ever been to it or not, but it's an awesome church. But when these people started this church, they weren't just thinking about Ocean Springs, Mississippi. When these people started this church, they were thinking about the entire Mississippi Gulf Coast. And so when we jumped into this study of Nehemiah, we felt like the right title for the series was Unfinished Business, because if we're truly going to reach the entire Gulf Coast, at some point, we have to navigate beyond the borders of Ocean Springs, and we have to go into other communities. It was that vision that compelled me to say, I want to be a part of that church. When I heard about this place called Mosaic, I heard about a church that wasn't just maintaining. I heard about a church that was truly living on mission, and I wanted to be a part of it, so much so that I moved my family all the way from Northeast Ohio down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and we've been loving the ride ever since. And so, yes, we do have a great thing going on here in Ocean Springs, but I do want us to realize the importance of reaching the entire Gulf Coast. For months now, we've been talking about starting a new campus over in Harrison County on August 6th. For months now, you've heard me talking a lot about what we're going to do, but you haven't heard me talking about where we're going to be. Because the truth is, we had no idea where we were going to be. At least that was the case until just a few days ago. And so today, I am really excited to make a big announcement to you. Yes, we have an entire staff team in place. We've hired all 3 people who are going to be leading the charge out in Harrison County. We have a great core team that has already been meeting on a regular basis to learn and to get on the same page in preparation for this launch. But now, we also have a location that I'm excited to tell you about. On Monday, yeah, we got the hands up in the air. On Monday, you can clap. On Monday, we were told that we have permission to use the D'Iberville Middle School for our weekly gatherings in our Harrison County community. Now, I know a lot of us hear that and we celebrate, we applaud, we're thankful. But I don't just want you to be thankful. I want you to be excited, okay? And so when I walked over there and toured the facility and walked around, I saw one thing, and then I came back, and my creative team said, we're going to show you another thing. You saw what it is, but the creative team said, we're going to show you what it's going to be. And so I got a before and after photo. This is what they showed me. I'll show it to you. This is the before photo. It looks like a gym because it's a gym, okay? And so I saw it and I go, God, I'm thankful. Don't know if I could say I was excited, but then they showed me the after picture, and this is literally how they're going to transform that space, okay? These guys are incredible at what they do. They have not just created a great space for us here in Ocean Springs, they have created and are in the process of creating a fantastic space for our Harrison County campus. If you've been around from the beginning, then you may remember this place called the Mirrored Hall. Anybody remember Mirrored Hall? Okay, I know you've tried to forget about it, but we used to meet in the Mirrored Hall. Anybody remember the stanky skating rink? Anybody? Yes, you remember the skating rink, right? This space is going to be way better than either one of those, okay? And so if we got from there to here, I can't even wait to see what God's going to do over in Harrison County. I am truly, truly excited about all that is in store for us coming this fall. Now, with that being said, I need every one of you to do me a favor, okay? I need you to be praying for this guy right here, okay? You guys all know Jeremy. We were 2 months away from launch, and we had no place to meet. And that guy right there literally pulled all of his hair out trying to find us a campus for our Harrison County community, right? I am seriously so thankful for Jeremy. I'm thankful for Mike. I'm thankful for Matt and Hannah. I'm thankful for our core team. I'm thankful for all of our volunteers, our real estate agent, everybody else who's in real estate that came up to us and said, hey, I got a place that you may want to think about, because all of that took a lot of work. But what I know now is that hard work is going to pay off in a really big way. I'm excited about this specific location for a number of reasons. Number one, when we look at a map and we drop all of our people on a map, we know that a lot of our people live in that immediate community. But the other thing we know about that immediate community, we got a lot of people there, and there are not a lot of churches there. And there are definitely very few churches in that area that look anything like Mosaic Church. And so I'm excited because I see not just a great space, I see a great need, and I know God's put us there so that we can meet that need. The second thing I love about this space is its proximity to I-10, okay? We'll throw it up on a map. If you live in central Harrison County or even west Harrison County and you are driving east to come to Ocean Springs, you literally drop right off of I-10 and boom, you are already there. And so it is very convenient for people who are traveling the I-10 corridor. And then the final thing that I love about this is I love the fact that we're going to be in one of our local schools. When you get into the community, rather than gathering in a place like this, it opens your eyes. You get to see what they're doing and you get to see what needs they have so that we will be in a position to meet needs and to serve our community in an even more meaningful way. Now, a lot of things that I love about that location, but I do want to say this. That is not our permanent location. And I would even tell you that may not even be our long-term location. We have no interest in being in a portable setup for years on end. And so you need to know we're going to keep looking for a permanent location, and I need you guys to keep praying for God to give us our permanent location. But in the meantime, we got a great place to get started, and we're going to be starting in about 7 weeks. Starting in the month of July, I'll tell you this real quick, and then we'll move on. On July 9th, July 16th, July 23rd, and July 30th. Okay, those 4 weeks, everybody who's part of the Harrison County team is actually going to be meeting at that location to do test services for 4 weeks before we open the doors on August 6th. Those 4 test services are not so that we can have a country club feel. It's so that we can iron out all the kinks and eliminate all the problems so that we don't embarrass ourselves or distract the people that we're trying to reach when we go public. And so I want you to be thinking about jumping in and joining that Harrison County team, especially if you live in and or work in Harrison County. I know that God's going to do great things when we open the doors on August 6th. Now, you know what we're doing. Now you know where we're going to be doing it. But for the rest of our time together today, I want to remind you of why we are doing it. Because the why is the most important part. Author and speaker Simon Sinek once wrote a book. It was called Start with Why. If you're in the marketing business or really any other business, you should probably read this book. In that book, he said this. He said, people don't buy what you do. People buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. It's so true. People may not care all that much about what you do or what kind of business you run or what kind of products you sell, but they might just care about why you're doing it. I want you to think about that with me today in our context. I want you to also think about it in Nehemiah's context. When I talk to my team about things that we put out to communicate, I talk to them about announcements that we communicate from this stage. I talk to them about posts that we put on social media platforms. I talk about videos that we create. And when we try to communicate with our people, we have to remember the why, and we have to communicate the why very, very clearly. I tell my team all the time, people don't care about what we're doing, but they might deeply care when they understand why we are doing it. I want you to just think about Extreme Week, for example. This coming week, we're kicking off Extreme Week. If you grew up in church, it's like VBS on steroids, okay? Kids are going to come into this place, literally, probably 600 to 700 kids are going to come into this place on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Evening sessions are 6 to 8. There's going to be some music. There's going to be some teaching. There's going to be some games. There's going to be some activities. Then on Thursday night, there will be a big celebration at the end of the week. That's what we're doing. And if that's all we talk about in the offering vision segment of the service, then I know what you do. You glaze over and you tune us out. Why? Because you don't care about what we're doing. I don't care about what other people are doing. But now I'm going to tell you why we're doing it. And I want you to hear me say this about Extreme Week. The reason that we are doing it is because we believe that what a person does with Jesus will ultimately determine two things. It will determine in large part what their life looks like while they live on this earth. And it will absolutely determine where they spend eternity. We absolutely believe here at Mosaic Church that what a person does with Jesus is going to make a big difference in their life. We believe that following Jesus makes people better at life, and following Jesus makes life better. We believe that Jesus has the power and the ability and even the desire to transform broken people into brand new people. And so there is no doubt in our mind that following Jesus is a very big deal. But we also know that somewhere around 90% of people who ever become a follower of Jesus, they do so before they graduate high school. And so if you want to know why we're doing Extreme Week and why we pump a lot of money into that, is because we are trying to reach young people with the good news of Jesus Christ before they wreck and ruin their life and before it is too late. Now, you don't just understand what we're doing. Now you understand why we're doing it. And when you understand why, it makes you want to get involved. When you understand why, it makes you want to bring your kids, makes you want to kidnap somebody else's kids and bring them. It makes you want to give to it. It makes you want to volunteer in it, because the why is the most compelling part. Now, think about it not just in our context. Think about it in Nehemiah's context. If you were in the city of Jerusalem and some guy named Nehemiah came up to you and said, "Hey, I want you to come help me rebuild this wall," that's not all that compelling. Then he follows it up and says to you, "It's going to take somewhere around 2 months. The work is going to be really hard. We're going to be so busy. You won't have time to work your normal jobs. You're not going to get paid, but I really want you to come help me rebuild this wall." What I know about most of us is that we are not going to help him rebuild that wall, because we're not all that interested in rebuilding walls. But if Nehemiah makes a shift in what he communicates, and he stops talking to us about what he's doing, and he starts explaining to us why he is doing it, now we just might join him in the great work that God has given him to do. If Nehemiah tells you that years earlier there were a group of people who lived in that city, they were invaded by their enemies, that their homes were plundered, that their temples were torn down, that their city had been destroyed, and that their wives and children were taken into captivity. If he tells you that they have now been set free, but they have no place to go and they have no home to return to. If he tells you that he's rebuilding that wall in that city so that these people can return to their homes, so that they can come back together as a family, so that they can return to their faith, and so that they can return to their way of life, and this wall is going to keep these poor people safe. Now, you don't just know what he's doing. When you understand why he's doing it, the likelihood that you're going to get involved, it goes through the roof. If you're not all that interested in the Harrison County project, it's probably because you don't understand or you're not focused on why we're doing it. All you've been hearing is what we're doing. With that in mind, I want to read to you Nehemiah chapter 7, verses 4 through 6. Now, the city was large and spacious, but there were very few people in it, and the houses had not yet been rebuilt. So my God put it into my heart to assemble the nobles, the officials, and the common people for registration by families. I found the genealogical record of those who had been the first to return. This is what I found written there. These are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. Now, in order for this to make sense, you've got to stay focused on what we read there at the beginning of verse 4. There, Nehemiah tells us that the city was large and spacious, but he tells us there were very few people who were living in it. Now, you might look at what Nehemiah is doing and you might think, this doesn't even make sense. Nobody's even living in this city. Why is this guy so interested in rebuilding this massive wall and even interested in rebuilding their homes? The city is large and it's spacious, but there are very few people who are even here. See, Nehemiah understands something that a lot of us may not understand or a lot of his critics may not understand. Nehemiah is not doing this project by himself. He has what he would call a silent partner. He's doing this job with God. And what Nehemiah knows is that he's got a job to do, but he also knows that God has a job to do. And together, they are going to make a huge impact in this place and on these people. Nehemiah's job is to build back the city. And God's job is to bring people back to the city. And so Nehemiah is going to rebuild this city because he believes and he trusts that God will do his part of the job. You need to know God is not just bringing people back to this city. The whole goal of this project ultimately is for God to bring these people back to himself. These people matter to God. And so these people matter to Nehemiah. And when Nehemiah hears about their condition and when he looks at their state, he says these people need help. He knows that when these people got taken into captivity, they lost everything. They lost their places of worship. They lost their freedom to worship. These people lost their homes. They lost the safety that the wall provided as they left into captivity. Many of them lost touch with family members. And in the process of losing all of that, most of these people lost all hope. They lost everything that they loved. A lot of them lost touch with everyone that they loved. And they had no idea how to get it back until Nehemiah showed up and started the great work that God had given him to do. Nehemiah is not rebuilding this city so that it can sit there like a ghost town. The people are coming because he knows that God is going to bring them there. And when they get there, he knows they need homes where they can live. They need a temple where they can worship. They need a wall that will keep them safe. And they need spiritual leaders in their life. And when I tell you that people were coming, I'm telling you a whole lot of people were coming because God is really good at his job. If you go back and you read in chapter 7, verse 8, all the way down through verse 63, it's just a long list of names that are really hard to pronounce. And so I'm not going to embarrass myself by reading that section to you. You can have fun reading it yourself. But when you look at the long list of families and their descendants, what you will see is that beside each descendant is a number. And the number tells us how many people were a part of that particular family. And if you add it all up, According to verse 66 and 67, the whole company numbered 42,360 people, besides their 7,337 male and female slaves, and they also had 245 male and female singers. And so if you want to know why Nehemiah was so determined to do this great work that God had given him to do, it's because he knew God is going to bring somewhere in the realm of 50,000 people back to this city. Let me ask you, how many of you would get involved in the Harrison County project if you knew God was going to bring 50,000 people to the Harrison County campus? See, a lot of people don't get involved doing what they can do because they don't really believe that God is going to do what God can do. We've got a job to do, Mosaic. We're going to do our job, and God is going to do his job. The people who were coming back to this city, they weren't just coming back to a place. They were coming back and they were looking for hope. The people who were coming out of this ungodly place called Babylon, they were not just looking for hope, they were looking for God, and ultimately they were looking for a brand new start at life. Those people mattered to God, and so yes, they mattered to this man named Nehemiah. Mosaic, I really do believe with all of my heart that God is going to bring a whole lot of people to the Harrison County campus. I believe that God is leading us into this project, and he hasn't led us into this project so that the D'Iberville Middle School can sit there empty. And so we got to do our part, and we got to trust that God is going to do his part. We're going to start it, and God is going to bring people to it, but we have to be prepared to care for them when they come. If God brings them and we do not care for them, that is the equivalent of spiritual child abuse. These people matter to God, and therefore these people should matter to us. I understand that most of us don't really care all that much about what we're doing. But if we're followers of Jesus, we really should care when we understand why we are doing it. Just like in Nehemiah's day, the people in Harrison County, they have broken homes and they have broken families. Just like in Nehemiah's day, there are people in Harrison County who have lost their jobs and they've lost their loved ones. Just like in Nehemiah's day, there are people who have lost their way and they have lost all hope. And so they're looking for God. They're looking for a fresh start at life. These people, they matter to God, Mosaic. And because they matter to God, they have to matter to us. But I want to be clear about something. We're not just going to have a place for these people. We're going there so that we can serve these people. We've got a lot of people in our church who love to write a check, and that's great. But we got to have a lot of people in the church who are also willing to roll up their sleeves and go mano a mano with people in need. It's going to take both big checks and a lot of people. I want to take you back to the beginning of chapter 7, and I want to read to you those first 3 verses that I bypassed, because what you're going to see in these verses is that there are a lot of different people who are doing a lot of different things in order to cause the city to flourish. Listen to what he says. After the wall had been rebuilt and I had set the doors in place, the gatekeepers, the musicians, and the Levites were appointed. I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and he feared God more than most people do. I said to them, the gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot. While the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut the doors and bar them. Also appoint residents of Jerusalem as guards, some at their post and some near their own houses. Now, I want you to understand what's happening here. They've got a wall and they've got gates that are designed to protect the city. They've got guards who are watching over their homes, but what they're really trying to protect are their lives. And I'm not just talking about their physical well-being. What Nehemiah has in mind is their greater spiritual well-being. You got to remember, God is not just bringing these people back to the city. God's real aim is to bring these people back to himself. But in order to accomplish that goal, a couple of things need to happen. They have to keep the wrong people out of their life, and they have to get the right people back into their life. I want you to think about this for just a minute. Have you ever noticed that the people you do life with, they ultimately determine the quality of your life, and they often determine the direction of your life? This is a grave concern for Nehemiah as he thinks not just about rebuilding a city, but as he thinks about restoring a people. It's a big deal because 2 of the last 3 weeks we've read about these guys named Sanballat and Tobiah. If you weren't here, you just need to know this. They're not the kinds of guys that you want your son hanging around, and they're definitely not the kind of guys that you want your daughter dating, okay? These 2 guys, they hated God's people, and they hated the great work that God was doing. And Nehemiah knows we got to keep guys like that out of our city. And what he really means is we got to keep guys like that out of our lives. Why? Because bad company corrupts good character. You've seen it in your life. I've certainly seen it in my life. There are days when I kept bad company and I ended up in bad places. There were other days, as much as I hate to admit it, when I didn't keep the bad company, but I was the bad company. And I could tell you that my bad influence affected other people in bad ways. It's the way the world works. You are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with. If you know this study, if you've been with us throughout the book of Nehemiah, then you understand that this is what got the Israelites into this whole mess in the first place. When God originally gave them this land, He warned them that this could happen. You spend too much time with the wrong people, and your life will start going in the wrong direction. Some of you need to hear that today. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 14 and 15, God said to them, "Do not follow other gods, the gods of the peoples around you. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and His anger will burn against you, and He will destroy you from the face of the land." This is how these people ended up in exile. Spent a lot of time with the wrong people, and God's warning became their reality. They spent way too much time with the wrong people. Started worshiping the wrong kinds of gods. Started doing the wrong kinds of things. And so God said, if you don't want a relationship with me, you don't have to have a relationship with me, but that means you people are on your own. And God's hand of blessing was removed. God's hand of protection was removed. Their enemies invaded. Their homes were plundered. Their temple was torn down. Their city was destroyed. And their people were taken into exile. Now, many years later, about 140 of them, Nehemiah and his team have been doing a great work to rebuild the city and to restore these people. And so now Nehemiah, as he's getting things in place, he starts thinking, okay, how do we make sure that we bring these people back to God, but how do we make sure that they never walk away from God again? And so in verse 3, he gives some very clear instructions. The gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot. While the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut the doors and bar them. Also appoint residents of Jerusalem as guards, some at their posts and some near their own houses. Why is it that Nehemiah doesn't want the gate opened until the sun is hot. It's because he doesn't want anyone coming into that city or going out of that city under the cover of darkness. The only way you're getting into this city is if you come in broad daylight and you first check in with the gatekeeper. Why? Because we got to keep the wrong people out of our lives. But Nehemiah doesn't stop there. He knows it's not just enough to keep the wrong people out of our lives. He knows we got to get the right people into our lives. And listen to me, this is ultimately what Harrison County is all about. Listen again to verse 2. He said, I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and he feared God more than most people do. Are you familiar with the term influencers in our culture today? An influencer is someone who has a very large social media following. 25, 35, 45 million people might follow them on Instagram. And so they take all kinds of pictures of themselves, and companies pay them a lot of money to do it, so that all of their followers that they are influencing are basically being told, this is what you should buy, this is what you should wear, this is what you should do, and this is what your life should look like. We need to think long and hard about what kinds of people we really want to be influencing our communities here on the Gulf Coast. Nehemiah looks at Hanani and he looks at Hananiah, and he elevates them into positions of leadership because he knew them, he knew their integrity, and he knew a lot about their personal relationship with God. This is so important. In order to lead people back to God, you don't just need a place, you need a human presence. In order to lead Harrison County back to God, we don't just need a place, we need a human presence. We need good, godly people who live in the land and provide strong spiritual leadership to those in need. Guys, we can't just be the kinds of people that God wants us to be. We have to focus on being the kinds of people that people in our community need us to be. And so my question for us as a church family is simply this. Do you live your life like Hananiah? Are you a person of integrity? And do you fear God more than most people do? That's who we need to be. And if that's not who we are, we got to be honest about that, and we got to be committed to becoming that kind of person. We got to spend more time with Jesus, and we've got to become more like Jesus, because more of Jesus is what this world needs. And when that happens in this church, we go from having a place in Harrison County to having a presence in Harrison County. We're not just an institution, we become a real influence. And that's what makes a difference in a community. Remember, we're not just going to Harrison County to build a campus. We're going to Harrison County to bring people back to God. It's a rescue mission. And we need people who will go on that mission, and they're committed to loving those who are far away from God. They're committed to serving those who are far away from God. They're committed to sharing the love and the truth of Jesus with those who are far away from God. And so again, if you live in Harrison County or if you live in Ocean Springs, I don't care. I'm just asking you to go. I'm asking you to love, and I'm asking you to serve the world around you wherever God puts you. In many ways, the size of our impact will depend on the size of our team. You know that. And so I want you to look at this card that was on your seat when you walked in. This card communicates all of our top volunteer needs here in Ocean Springs as well as in Harrison County. I'm asking every single one of you to get in the game if you call Mosaic your church home. The church does not exist for us. We are the church, and we exist for the world, whether it be here in Ocean Springs or over there in Harrison County. I tell people all the time, you are never more like Jesus than when you serve. And so start serving. Hope you'll take a moment. I hope you'll fill out this card. We'll have volunteers that'll be placed at all of the exits. You can drop it off on your way out. But just to be clear, why should you serve? Because people matter to God. And they should matter to us. Let's pray together. God, I thank you so much for the story of Nehemiah. God, I thank you for this chapter today that gives some needed clarity, not so much about what he was doing, but about why he was doing it. And I just pray, God, for your people. I pray, God, that you might start to burden our hearts for people in need. I pray, God, that we would get laser focused and have a very clear understanding of why this project is so important and why our weekend services here in Ocean Springs are so important. Pray, God, that we might see volunteering as an opportunity to live more like Jesus and make a bigger difference in the world. So, God, I trust that you will lead your people with your Spirit to the exact opportunity where you want them to be. But God, help us to leave today feeling a sense of urgency to get in the game. Pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. A couple of things